You know, one of the things that bothers me about the current iteration of Star Trek under Alex Kurtzman is its disregard for human life. Its nihilistic view of life in general. And in a way, I suppose it makes sense considering that our world is a lot more nihilistic than it used to be. But at the same time, our world is also very racist. And in that same vein, Star Trek, the original series, did not display that in the same way that current Star Trek directly and explicitly speaks about nihilism. Not only is it not allegorical, not only is it not upward in its storytelling in describing these things, it's direct. It's in your face. It's your main characters, who are supposed to be a more idealized version of things, doing these acts, committing these murders. And it's okay to murder as long as you make the action of the person you're murdering just bad enough for it to be justified or accepted. And that is not upward. That is downward. That is giving into our worst instincts, right? It's not very hopeful. It's not very Star Trek. And the nihilistic aspect is this devaluation of life that we see. You have meaningless deaths. You have meaningless just to be cool or to show that all the accomplishment of this one particular Voyager character we see in the intro, that we would assume that in normal Trek they would go on to do great things. We're just going to kill him off because all his potential is meaningless. It doesn't matter. Who cares? It's whatever. This nihilistic view of life is one of my long-running issues with Star Trek Picard and modern Trek in general. They do not value life. They despise it. They see it as very nihilistic, which is a reflection of the current world we live in at least in the Western sphere of things, and the materialism that we're soaked in. But Star Trek, even when it was soaked in different milieus, always tried to transcend those milieus. Always try to give us stories that we could then reflect on. But Star Trek Picard and all these new Star Trek ideas that are coming out are not that. They will display those direct things within Star Trek rather than allegorically speaking about them, rather than making it a problem for aliens that humans and the Federation deal with. Rather, it's now the Federation, it's now the humans, it's now whoever else is relevant. Of chopping off a Romulan senator's head so easily instead of talking it out, who might have had legitimate grievances, who did nothing wrong other than get mad when Picard went out of his way to provoke them, and they deserve to die for that. Modern Star Trek is nihilistic. It's depressing. And it's frustrating. And this recent episode of Star Trek Picard was very, very disgusting, very insidious, unnecessary amount of murder and graphic gore. I'm not opposed to such things, but I am opposed to it in Star Trek. Could you show your kids this type of Star Trek with this type of gore of beheadings, for God's sake? No, I would not. In 1,000 years. I will show them TNG. I will show them even DS9. When I watch those, I feel hopeful. I feel a certain comfort. I feel a longing that it is life positive. It is not nihilistic. It has its principles, its stances, and it gives us solutions, or at the very least, a mirror, right? But it was never so direct in a consistent way at its core. That's not what Star Trek is at its core. It's about life. It's not about murder. It's not about all this cool samurai nonsense. This Star Trek is not Star Trek, except by name. Rather, it is a generic sci-fi. Firefly. It's elements from that. It's elements from a lot of other shows that do what it's trying to do a lot better. It has fantasy elements. It has stories about refugees, and they kill a refugee. That Romulan senator was a refugee. And then they kill And they couldn't even get the proper actor for this character that they had return from Voyager, and they kill him off in such a brutal way, such an unceremonious way. So this episode, as I was saying, there was this episode of The Next Generation, the season 3 episode called The Survivor, and in that episode we meet these two human couples called the Uxbridges that were the survivors of this attacks by an alien species, right? And we discover by the end that Mr. Uxbridge was actually the only survivor, and his wife was his own creation, meaning that he was revealed to be this creature, this super powerful alien called a Daoud. And when these Husnaks came and wiped out the colonists, in a fit of anger, he wiped them all out from existence. Complete genocide. So he was near omnipotent. And how did Captain Picard, when listening to this, react? Did he celebrate? Did he find some justification to approve it? After all, they did kill an entire colony of Federation citizens, or what have you. No. What you see, and Patrick Stewart plays this perfectly, is this existential horror, this crisis of, he's trying to wrap his head around this concept of what he's hearing and trying to understand it. And he ultimately decides their system of law just can't judge this type of situation. If they were to make this episode now, they would find some justification for that genocide. You wouldn't get this existential horror, this betterment that you want to be, right? This thing that is Star Trek. You wouldn't get that. This, what we have now, is completely antithetical to Star Trek. It is anti-Trek. It is not Star Trek. It has elements and sprinkles and branches, but the tree itself is not Star Trek. The tree is something else, right? The core aspects that make something that thing, the core aspects that make a narrative work, that's missing from current Trek. You might have a few things here and there, nostalgia, little shots at hope here and there, but the overall structure, the feeling, the essence, when you analyze it, the foundation is not that of Star Trek. It's something else. It's just writers who can't write or think things out, trying to meet deadlines real fast for a streaming service that read generic sci-fi, steal ideas from people, as well as taking ideas from other shows and not doing it pretty well. Star Trek is supposed to be a pioneer, not a copycat. Or at the very least, when the copycat does it well, it tries to make it into its own something. It's fine. And this is not what current Star Trek is. And also, it was Picard who engineered a situation that got a man beheaded. And no one seems to think about that, right? It was Picard. If he did not go in there and provoke those Romulans, would that senator have had his head chopped off? No. He could have just left. But that is how it is today, right? In today's environment, you have people that will go to extremes for whatever social justice goals that they have, ruin a person's life without evidence to make a point. You have these, what I call very extreme leftists or fascists or feminazis or what have you in various spheres of places doing this to people. And this is a reflection in the writing. This is the people that are writing Star Trek, not people with writing skills, reading actual sci-fi novels. Just people that have some social justice nonsense and they just want to pursue that. And I know they're trying to reflect modern day stuff in a very ham-fisted way. But, as a teacher myself, what I start to notice is this lack of respect that kids have for parents, that kids have for teachers, and you see parenting styles being affected in as well, where they're a lot softer on the child, like very device driven, right? Creating children that lack empathy. We see the same thing with Star Trek. This lack of respect for humanoid life, human life, this lack of respect for authority and tradition, this lack of respect for ideals and principles. It's very nihilistic stuff. And Star Trek is not supposed to be that. Star Trek was made first in a racist era, civil rights movement era, or near the end of that era, right? And it was not portrayed in the same way. They rose above that. Abraham Lincoln came onto that show, and Uhura was confused when he used the N-word towards her, and it wasn't even a thought to her. That is Star Trek. It gives us hope. It's not this ham-fisted, lazy type of writing. And it's played very insidiously in Discovery and in this. And it's played for entertainment, murder, these types of death. And it's almost justified. Just like how today we have certain individuals justifying ruining people's lives without evidence, or this or that, or going crazy, or telling them to do this and that because their cause is justified, and this and that. You know, it's a bunch of extremists, and that is what I see in modern day Star Trek in its analysis. I don't know who this Picard is. I don't know who these characters. I don't know what this universe is. It doesn't feel Star Trek. I don't feel at home. I don't feel the comfort of DS9. And that was a dark show, but at its core, it was Star Trek. Right? It's those qualities that make a thing until it's not that thing. And when we watch, for example, the episode where Kirk is about to kill that Gorn, he spares the life of that Gorn, and if that was today, he would have chopped its head off, maybe ripped off his skin and made himself a coat out of its scale or what have you. That's what modern Star Trek is versus the old. He spared that Gorn, showed it mercy. That is what Star Trek is. Right? It doesn't matter if it's realistic or not. That's not the point of Star Trek. It's a mirror of what we can be, or rather, we achieve this thing, this fictional utopia, and that fictional utopia is interacting with our world, and our world is reflected through different alien cultures. It's reflected through allegory. And when we face challenges as humans in the Star Trek world, we overcome them, or rather, it stays as a minority issue. It's minority in number of admirals that are like this, right? It's about the core, the essence, and that's what's missing. You know, Kirk didn't just, when Species 3 was, handled, Kirk didn't just say that, I'm gonna kill you because of that. He would have been justified, just like some of these deaths are shown to be justified to one extent or another. But he thought, maybe you thought that we were encroaching on your territory. Maybe you were threatened. Maybe we were in the wrong, even if, from our perspective, that wasn't the case. And he let him go. And then that Metron alien appeared, very powerful alien, and he was surprised. He was testing to see how Kirk was, and he said that nowhere in our little study or whatever scan showed us that you had a quality of mercy, right? And interestingly enough, modern Trek kind of shows that they lack quality of mercy. But this show, that wouldn't have happened. He would have showed no mercy. And like I said earlier, Star Trek, it used to be a show that the whole family could sit down and watch, but now it seems to not be that. It isn't that, because I wouldn't want to show my family this type of show. 3 deaths in one episode within 45 minutes, very close quarter combat type of situation. Well, except for one was a mercy killing with the Voyager cast returning and then dying. I wouldn't show this to my kids. I wouldn't show this to my family. This is disgusting. This seems to be for an audience, a very specific type of audience, and not for everyone. Star Trek is supposed to influence everyone, not just adults who can watch this because of its rating or, and being a streaming service, I guess they thought they could get away with anything that they want to include it, but no. This is not Star Trek. And curse the people that are creating this. They are destroying something that has some value. And that's, I guess, in a sad way, also a reflection of our current times, but not in a way that's appropriate for Trek. It's just too easy. It's killing people. It's just too easy. Hey, you can do it on camera. Hey, it's what people do, right? It's realistic. It's dark, edgy, dystopian Trek. And that's not Trek, because Trek is not dystopian. It is utopian. That's what's one of the things that's changing its fundamental DNA.
You know what great writers do? Great writers don't fall prey to such easy tropes.
And great writers, you know what they do? They do not fall to such easy tropes. They do not rely on such downward things. They rise above that. And, when we see the Balance of Terror episode in TNG, we see the Romulans, crossing our borders, killing potentially civilians and this and that. And what do we see? We see by the end that there is this begrudging type of compromise, this begrudging respect or so forth between them, right? Between the Romulans and the Federation. And here, we see these murders. In the previous episode, we see murders. It's like they like showing murders on screen. They like showing these things. It's their easy ticket to make it feel cool and shock factor, right? And what does that say about that Romulan senator who got his head chopped off so easily, right? You want to show a warrior's prowess. You couldn't figure out some other way. What does that say about his life? To me as an audience member, it tells me it's worthless, it's meaningless, because it shows me how cheap it was, right? It's not what Star Trek is. It's not. And Star Trek isn't about justifying murder. It never has been, and it never should be. And this is what I'm sensing, this insidiousness of this show and other shows. Anyways, I'm gonna have my episode review of Picard later on, in a few days or so, as well as some theory videos I have about the rest of the season. I don't know what I'm watching. It's leaving me depressed, but I'm gonna follow through for Patrick Stewart, because to know him is to love him, and to love him is to know him. Please subscribe, comment, like this video, share. Have a good one, guys.